Saul Bellow's Herzog, 1964, is one of the landmark novels of 20th-century American literature and a quintessential exploration of the modern intellectual's struggle for meaning in a disorienting world. The novel follows Moses E. Herzog, a middle-aged, twice-divorced, intellectually gifted but emotionally wounded academic, who attempts to recover from personal betrayal and existential disillusionment by writing a series of unsent letters to friends, enemies, historical figures, and cultural icons. The narrative is both introspective and chaotic, reflective of Herzog's fractured mental state. Through his inner monologues and philosophical letters, Bellow weaves themes of identity, alienation, betrayal, intellect versus emotion, and modern malaise. Combining biting satire, lyrical prose, and philosophical depth, Herzog is not only a portrait of a man in crisis but also a meditation on Western civilization, intellectual ambition, and the complexity of human relationships. Setting and opening. The novel begins with the famous line, "If I am out of my mind, it's all right with me." This sets the tone for the story of Moses Herzog, a 47-year-old professor of literature who is suffering a psychological breakdown following the collapse of his second marriage to Madeline, who has left him for his friend Valentine Gersbach. At the beginning of the novel, Herzog is living alone in a dilapidated house in the Berkshires, brooding over his life and composing mental, and sometimes physical, letters to a range of recipients, from family members to Nietzsche and Heidegger. These letters are more therapeutic than communicative, they are never mailed. Herzog's emotional and intellectual collapse. Herzog's crisis is both personal and philosophical. He is devastated by Madeline's betrayal and worried about his young daughter, June, who now lives with Madeline and Valentine. He is also grappling with the failure of his academic career and his magnum opus, a book critiquing modern man's abandonment of humanism. He feels intellectually isolated, emotionally unstable, and incapable of genuine relationships. His mind oscillates between memory, abstraction, and delusion. As he writes letters to figures like Spinoza and President Eisenhower, Herzog attempts to wrestle with the meaning of life, love, responsibility, and Western culture. Encounters and relationships. The novel alternates between Herzog's stream of consciousness reflections and his real-world interactions. Despite his erratic thoughts, he remains functional and continues to move through the world. Key figures in Herzog's life include Ramona, a sensual, kind woman who offers Herzog affection and stability. She is one of the few people who love him unconditionally, but he struggles to reciprocate in a meaningful way. Lucas Asphalter, Herzog's friend and a kind-hearted misfit who looks after Herzog and offers support during his low points. Madeline, his second wife, who is portrayed as emotionally manipulative, controlling, and self-serving, though the narrative also suggests Herzog is partly responsible for the failure. Valentine Gersbach, Herzog's former friend and current rival, a charismatic and jovial radio announcer who is now co-parenting June with Madeline. Daisy, Herzog's first wife, who appears briefly in the story. Though they are estranged, their relationship is relatively peaceful compared to his second marriage. Herzog's journey to Chicago. Midway through the novel, Herzog travels to Chicago to visit his daughter June. Obsessed with protecting her from Madeline and Valentine, Herzog takes a loaded gun with him, contemplating some form of confrontation or retribution. However, when he sees June peacefully sleeping, he is overwhelmed by love and abandons the idea of violence. This moment is crucial. It marks a turning point in his psychological recovery. He begins to see the futility of revenge and the necessity of emotional clarity. Conclusion. Toward healing. In the final chapter, Herzog returns to his old house in the Berkshires. He has stopped writing letters. He reflects on his past, his failures, and the state of the world, but now with a sense of peace. Though he remains intellectually restless, he has chosen to embrace the simplicity of being. He had no messages for anyone. Nothing. Not a single word. This line signals Herzog's acceptance of his limitations and a quiet reconciliation with life. He does not solve his problems or find a grand philosophical answer. Instead, he finds humility and presence. Character analysis. Moses Herzog. Moses Herzog is a richly drawn and deeply human character. He is intelligent, neurotic, self-aware, and at times insufferable. His brilliance as a scholar is counterbalanced by his emotional incompetence. He is incapable of sustaining relationships, consumed by abstractions, and often blind to the needs of others. Yet, Bellow imbues Herzog with pathos and humor. His internal suffering is not self-pitying but existential. He represents the modern intellectual dislocated from purpose, drowning in cultural analysis but unable to manage his personal life. Herzog's journey is not heroic in the classical sense. It is a journey of disillusionment and acceptance, moving from mental chaos toward emotional stillness. Madeline Herzog. Madeline is presented as a complex figure, both villainous and tragic. Herzog portrays her as emotionally volatile and manipulative, prone to mood swings, and obsessed with intellectual status. However, through flashbacks and reflection, the reader sees that their marriage was mutually destructive. She represents Herzog's entanglement with ego, desire, and intellectual vanity. Her relationship with Valentine is as much a betrayal as it is a continuation of her search for validation and control. Ramona. Ramona contrasts with Madeline. She is nurturing, stable, and emotionally open. Her sensuality is presented not as manipulative but healing. However, Herzog's ambivalence toward her reflects his fear of emotional dependence and lasting commitment. Ramona functions as a symbol of potential recovery, though Herzog is unsure if he is ready to accept it. Valentine Gersbach. Valentine is a symbol of charismatic pragmatism. A radio personality with a false leg, he represents charm, adaptability, and success in the public sphere. Herzog resents him not only for stealing Madeline but for embodying a kind of American confidence that Herzog lacks. Yet, Herzog ultimately realizes that even Gersbach has limitations. His anger gives way to understanding. Themes and analysis. 1. The crisis of the modern intellectual. At its core, Herzog is about the collapse of intellectual certainty. Herzog is a man of letters, but his erudition no longer serves him. He writes thousands of words to philosophers and politicians, but his real problems, loneliness, betrayal, loss, cannot be solved by reason. Bellow critiques intellectualism disconnected from emotion and action. Herzog's breakdown is as much about the failure of Western philosophy to provide meaning as it is about his personal failures. 2. Alienation and isolation. Herzog suffers from profound alienation, not only from society but from himself. He is emotionally isolated, culturally dislocated, and spiritually adrift. This theme echoes throughout the novel, reflecting a larger post-war malaise. Bellow shows that alienation is not just a social condition but a psychological and philosophical state. 3. Identity and selfhood. Herzog's letters function as a form of self-exploration. He is trying to understand who he is: husband, father, lover, thinker, failure, survivor. The multiplicity of his voices, ranging from rational to hysterical, suggests a fragmented self. As the novel progresses, Herzog moves from intellectual self-definition to emotional self-acceptance. He begins to value being overthinking. 4. Love and sexuality. Herzog's relationships with women, especially Madeline and Ramona, reveal his conflicted attitudes toward love, sex, and dependency. He idealizes women intellectually and spiritually but is often fearful of emotional intimacy. Through these dynamics, Bellow explores gender, power, and vulnerability, exposing both male egoism and the hunger for connection. 5. Redemption and renewal. Though Herzog begins the novel in despair, the narrative arc is ultimately redemptive. The turning point comes not through philosophical insight but through emotional confrontation. Seeing his daughter asleep, choosing not to act violently, and ceasing to write letters. Redemption in Herzog is quiet and human. It lies in choosing to live with one's imperfections, in valuing relationships over abstract ideas, and in accepting the limits of reason. Symbolism and style. 1. The letters. The letters Herzog writes serve multiple symbolic purposes. They reflect his intellectual entrapment, his inability to act, and his longing for understanding. They also represent an internal dialogue, a means of processing his grief, confusion, and anger. Their eventual cessation marks a shift from abstraction to experience, a crucial moment of personal growth. 2. The house in the Berkshires. Herzog's inherited country house is a symbol of decay and retreat. Its emptiness mirrors his inner state. Yet it is also a space of reflection, where he begins to rebuild emotionally. It embodies both the ruins of the past and the possibility of recovery. 3. The gun. The pistol that Herzog carries to Chicago is a symbol of desperation and potential violence. It represents the temptation of control through force, but Herzog's refusal to use it underscores his moral and emotional awakening. Narrative style and structure. Herzog employs a stream of consciousness technique, interspersed with narrative exposition, flashbacks, and letters. The structure is non-linear, reflecting the fragmentation of Herzog's mind. Bellow's style is dense, elusive, and rhythmic, combining high intellectual discourse with street-level realism and humor. His prose often oscillates between exuberant lyricism and existential weariness, capturing the complexity of Herzog's internal world. Historical and cultural context. Written in the early 1960s, Herzog captures the intellectual and cultural anxieties of the post-war era. The rise of psychoanalysis, the decline of religious faith, the questioning of Enlightenment ideals, and the increasing bureaucratization of society all inform the novel's themes. Bellow, a Jewish-American writer, also draws upon his heritage, exploring the tensions between assimilation and alienation, tradition and modernity. Critical reception and legacy. Upon publication, Herzog was a commercial and critical success, winning the National Book Award and cementing Bellow's reputation as one of America's leading novelists. The novel was praised for its psychological depth, intellectual ambition, and vivid language. Some critics, however, noted the male-centric perspective and the marginalization of female characters, a critique that has grown more prominent in contemporary readings. Nevertheless, Herzog remains a seminal work in the American literary canon, a profound exploration of the modern mind's struggle for coherence and meaning. Conclusion. Saul Bellow's Herzog is a brilliant, multifaceted novel that combines personal drama with philosophical inquiry. Through the character of Moses Herzog, Bellow examines the disintegration of intellectual certainty, the complexity of human relationships, and the quiet possibility of renewal. The novel's power lies not in resolution but in its honest depiction of ambiguity, the contradictions, failings, and yearnings that define human existence. Herzog is both a deeply individual story and a cultural mirror, reflecting the existential anxieties and aspirations of an entire era.